Monday night, John Lund is in the house. Welcome to the Krueger Show. After Monday Night Football, we got a new Monday guest. Looks like Johnny's going to be hanging. Let's go right now. All right, we get it rolling after Monday Night Football. If you just tuned in, Broncos over the Browns in a high-scoring affair. Whoa. Jerry Jeudy had a night. Jameis Winston had a big night. But Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos win at home. And most importantly, covered my teaser. Thank you. Because I had Eagles and Broncos on the tease. So I was getting Broncos plus 1.5. And at one point, they were up 1. And I was like, hey, maybe I could win a bet by a half point. But then they got the pick 6 and everything turned out all right. And Denver wins easily, and as do I. But welcome to the Krueger Show. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. People say, why do I say it like that? Because more people pay attention. If I say pig and a pickle, you forget. But if I say pig and a pickle, you remember it. And thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krueger Show. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket chili. Tell them that Krug sent you, and this live stream is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups, and you can win real money. I've won 5 times already this year, including this week. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does automatically is entered into a drawing to win the free or the signed Fred Warner jersey. We'll announce the winner here in a couple days. So good luck to all of you, and thanks to Better for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, John Lund is in the house, and we're going to talk Niners. We're going to talk football. And Johnny, good to see you, man. I know you got big things on the horizon. We got 49er Red Zone saying Larry and Lund, sweet. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. Kind of like you a couple of years ago. You kind of get blindsided by something, and then all of a sudden things start to open up, and you talk to all your contacts and your friends, and both you and I have been doing this for a long time. So a lot of exciting things coming up, not only from me, but the entire market. And I'm not going to disparage anybody, but I think there's a lot of people that are kind of in the situation that you were and I am, and there's a lot of exciting things to come. So it's a great sports town. Nowadays, there's just a changing of the landscape. It's very cool, but it's very exciting to talk to a lot of people. That's all I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. And I'm ready to roll. Going to debut something tomorrow. Always excited to talk to you. We've known each other for a long time, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And if people just go to John Lund Radio, then you can get everything. I'll post everything there. We can go from there. But excited to talk to you as always, bro.
Well, I'm super fired up, and I called you this afternoon, and we started talking. I'm like, dude, let's do this tonight. Let's get you on tonight. So I'm really fired up. You're one of the great radio guys in the country, and I'll just say it this way: John Lund will prevail. There's no doubt in my mind, because talent cream rises, talent survives, and you will prevail. And we're going to be a part of helping you prevail if we can be. Smiley Dan, who's a great guy, says John Lund in the house. Smiley Dan, good to see you. We shared a pizza. Absolutely. We went to Damon's meet and greet. Smiley Dan was there, and he said, "Man, let's go to a pizza place on Mission Street." So me and Smiley Dan, and I forget the other guy, we went to have pizza after the meet and greet. It was a great time. So Smiley Dan, good to see you. I've got this one in the chat. RSF 49ers Live says, apply for the defensive coordinator position, Larry. We need you. Oh, my God. If you're going to me for the DC, you're really hurting. Johnny, what'd you think? I mean, the 49ers right now is it's a tough watch. I mean, these last couple of weeks especially have been brutal. Give me before we go in a bunch of different directions and start hitting a bunch of topics, give me your breakdown on the game this weekend.
You know what it reminds me of, Krug? And let's just say that the injuries and the weirdness, and there is a weirdness to a season, both good and bad, right? We've seen it. You and I have been doing this a long time. When a team is really on a roll like the Giants were in 2021, and every guy you're bringing up is contributing, and it's just like you feel the magic in a positive way. And this year, from Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams holding out to Ricky Pearsall getting shot to just all the weird things. The latest now, Trent Williams wife had a stillborn baby last week. Mooney Man Ward, everything that has gone wrong. And these guys aren't robots that get poured out of lockers. They're ready to play a football game. They're human beings, and they get affected by all these things. So it just kind of started to roll, and we all kind of denied it. They're really talented. They can overcome. And then at some point, it's just like, you can't. And then you pile the injuries on top of it. And the injuries this year aren't an excuse. They're an explanation. And then you throw on top of that, look, I'm not on the bandwagon of fire Kyle Shanahan, but it doesn't mean it's kind of like with Steve Kerr or Bruce Bochy used to be, or all these great coaches, or Bill Walsh. I mean, look, a lot of these guys that I just mentioned are Hall of Famers, but it doesn't mean they're beyond reproach. And Kyle Shanahan, let's be honest, he's had a shit season. He just really has. His arrogance is shown through. They don't change their offense enough. They don't do enough things. They weren't prepared. Throw the injuries aside. They were not prepared to play in Buffalo in the snow. What are you doing? Chris Collinsworth the whole time is sitting there going, get the speed going one way. They can't stop you. Kyle Juszczyk, when the game was a little bit in doubt, when it was 21-3 after Debo's kick return, Kyle Juszczyk's carried the ball all season 3 times. I know.
Right. Why are you handing it to a guy who's not used to being handed the ball?
Mason's carried it for 8 yards a pop, and they can't stop him. He's like a piston back there. He's just boom, boom, boom. You can't tackle him. They have no grip on the ground. Run him right to the end zone. What are you doing? I'm smarter than you. You're not going to know that Kyle Juszczyk's going to get the ball. Yeah, he's carried it 3 times. He doesn't carry the ball. So that's on Kyle. The defensive coordinator, Nick Sorensen, has been a disaster. You lose Nick Bosa, you lose some of your defensive linemen. You have no choice but to bring extra pressure, and he never does. So what happens? The defensive backs get exposed. So that doesn't have to do with injuries. Sorensen should be out. Saleh should be back in. Offensive-wise, he needs a quality control coach to kind of say, Kyle, I like that, but let's change it up. He does the same things in the red zone. Christian McCaffrey isn't himself, but he wasn't going to save the red zone because Kyle Shanahan decided to bang his head against the wall constantly all season long, and everybody knew what play was coming and what down it was coming on. And oh, by the way, how does Brian Schneider have a job? I mean, we can keep going and we can acknowledge the weirdness of the season and the injuries that have happened and absolutely attract the season, but they have not coached well. They have not prepared well. This isn't Kyle's best season. All of it has just formed this disgusting stew that is the 49ers at 5-7.
You've painted the verbal picture, the disgusting stew.
I mean, that's what it is. It's in the pot, and injuries lead the way and weirdness leads the way. But Kyle, the offense, the red zone, the special teams, the penalties, the third down, both offensively and defensively. I mean, just throw it all together, and people scratch their head of how can a talented team have a season like this? This is how. And they're really lucky to be 5-7. And everybody sits there and says, well, they lost that 10-point lead and they lost that 10-point lead. The last 2 weeks has been an embarrassment. It reminds me of you and I sitting up in the booth during the Tom Shula era when everybody got 100 yards. You get 100 yards and you get 100 yards. And it was
Bilal Powell, come on down. Jacquizz Rodgers, come on down. Reuben Drones, come on down. The Chip Kelly era, they gave up like 7 consecutive 100-yard days in a row.
And Krug, I hate to say this because you really don't know, and this is the worst thing you can accuse a professional athlete or any athlete of, and I'm not an athlete, so what do I know? But they quit. They quit against Buffalo. They quit against Green Bay. And I understand why, because they had this great illusion of going back to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, where you and I once hung out for Super Bowl 47. And they just thought they'd throw their shoes on the field and they would be back in the Super Bowl. And now that they're not and they're 5-7, it's becoming clear, even in this crummy division, that they're not going to win it. They've kind of just said, to hell with it. I'm done. This season is going to end. This season isn't going to end the way we want. I'm done. And that's kind of the way they reacted against Buffalo. They just said, to hell with it.
No, as soon as they missed that field goal and then Cook went for the 65-yard touchdown run, they were done the rest of the night as far as stopping the run. No interest in it at all. It's a noticeable difference. It's all there on the All-22. You guys can go watch it. Here is Schefter with McAfee earlier today talking about the job security of Lynch and Shanahan.
Over there, right? For anybody?
I mean, I don't think so. Here's how I always think about it. because I think you're asking about the head coach or the GM, right? If they want to
Bingo.
move on from John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan, which I've gotten zero indication that they want to do, how quickly do you think it would be before there would be another team that would want to hire both of them?
Oh, yeah. Very quickly.
Well, there's no question about that. They would get a job very fast if they decided to, if somehow the Yorks say, you know what, Lynch, Shanahan, beat it, they'll get another job, and they'll get another job really, really quickly. There's no question about that. Now, let's hear from Cowherd, because Cowherd, says that Kyle should come back. He likes Kyle, but he wants contingencies. And it's kind of an interesting suggestion that he has here. Here's Cowherd.
Fire Kyle Shanahan. He's very good. But I do think you have to get him away from personnel. And here's what happens. It hurt Bill O'Brien. It hurt Gruden. It hurt Belichick. I think it hurt Pete Carroll. Is that what happens is the coaches, the star coaches, make 3 times what the general manager does. I mean, McVay makes much more than Les Snead. Shanahan is going to make much more than John Lynch. And so when these coaches get into these power situations, they get a lot of personnel say. And I think Kyle is drafting players for the moment. They've let their O-line and their D-line, they've neglected it. And I think he has to step back. Pete Carroll in Seattle, the death of Paul Allen, there was a leadership void, a vacuum, and then Pete kind of got in and had, in my opinion, a little too much control with personnel. John Snyder was going to take the Lions job. They pulled him back, and John, the last 2 or 3 drafts, has controlled it. Shocker, the Seahawks have had 3 straight great drafts. I like Kyle Shanahan, but I look at their drafts, and it feels like the coach has a little bit too much power. Now, there are some coaches who are very good with personnel. Sean Payton, Jimmy Johnson. I've been told McVay is good with personnel. He's got a real sense for it. Most coaches, I think, are better off coaching, players playing, GMs GMing. But, I when I look at Kyle Shanahan and that team, they're spiraling out of control. There's no easy fix. They're not one swing away. And when you're watching Brock Purdy on the field with Josh Allen, remember what these games are going to look like in December and January, February? That's what they're going to look like. Did that look like an even fight at quarterback? When you added the cold and the snow and the wind to Buffalo, that looked like Josh Allen against Mac Jones last night. I'm just saying.
All right, that's good. Well, we got the sense of it. What do you think, Johnny? As far as should they take personnel control? Should that be a contingency on Shanahan's returning, that he gives up some personnel control? What do you think?
Well, I would counter with this, and I respect Colin. He's a good friend of mine. We worked together for years. He called me when I got laid off, and I like what he's doing, but he's really dialed in with some teams, certainly in Southern California he is, and I don't know that he has a great source with the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan's not getting fired. Kyle Shanahan shouldn't get fired, and Kyle Shanahan's not giving up personnel control because he's the number 1 guy in the building, not John Lynch. So you're going to tell Kyle Shanahan, especially offensively, the kind of players, hey, I'm going to shop for the groceries. You just worry about the offense. Look, does Kyle need someone as a right-hand man to kind of offset him like Mike McDaniel did? Yeah. Do they need to maybe take personnel control about the coaches? Yeah. Nick Sorensen was not prepared for this job. That Brian Schneider shouldn't have a job. He shouldn't have had a job 6 weeks ago. If you want to complain about Kyle in those respects, being a little too arrogant in his play calling and those kind of things, I'll go with you on that. But as far as personnel, did they have a good draft this year? I think they
really
did.
Good draft.
It's pretty good. Look.
But they've had kind of some bad drafts the last couple years.
100%. Look, the Trey Lance thing, and we can get into Brock Purdy. I mean, I look, the more I watch Brock Purdy, and Buffalo aside, that wasn't fair. He is right about the Josh Allen thing, clearly. I mean, there's elite quarterbacks, and in the Bay Area, we've defended Brock, right? You know what he is now that people have scouted him and we know, and because of injuries, his weapons were taken away, and you're not always going to have those weapons. He reminds me a lot of Jared Goff. And so let's look at objectively Jared Goff. Well, Jared Goff is an MVP candidate this year, but he's played almost every single game indoors, and he maybe has the best offensive talent in the league. Well, Jared Goff's really good. Put Jared Goff outside, take some weapons away, and Jared Goff is kind of a reactionary player to his surrounding talent and to the weather and to all these things. Brock Purdy needs things to be generally right. And Jared Goff needs things to generally be right. But in this league, the problem is, and we started with this at the beginning of the show, good quarterbacks get $50 or $60 million. Dallas has got themselves in a situation. And the thing that scares me about Brock, and I know this is a conversation about Kyle, but the thing that scares me about Brock is what's going on in Dallas. If you overpay the wrong people again and again, and let's be honest, they shouldn't have paid Brandon Ayuk. That's going to come back and bite him, and they're going to lose players because of it. Well, Dallas had to sign CeeDee Lamb. They had to sign Dak Prescott, and all of a sudden, where are they? That's where the personnel problems are, and they're not drafting correctly. And I could see the 49ers going down that road. But Kyle's not going to give up, nor should he give up. I think that the one thing that's great about the Bay Area, and I don't know what the Giants are going to do, but when you look at the Warriors and their success, it's a team decision on what they do and how personnel is. And now, look, there's a lot less players there, but it's an effort amongst everybody. But Kyle gets final say. Kyle, if he wants a certain quarterback, gets him. If Kyle wants a certain offensive player, he gets him. But I do know this, and this is where I think Colin doesn't know the organization quite as well. You know this. We've been to a ton of drafts together, me and you, sitting right next to where they draft.
Yep.
Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have come in. Kyle doesn't demand and pound his fist, I want this guy. It's not that way. Kyle's not that way. And look, because he got Brandon Ayuk to stay, because he ran upstairs and that whole story, but that's an offensive guy that he wanted to keep. He doesn't get to draft every single player, or every single player would be an offensive skill position player, probably. And the other place I agree with Colin is, and you and I have talked about this a million times, the defensive line isn't close to what it was. So Armstead gets older. Hargrave gets hurt. They don't have anybody. Like Leonard Floyd has been garbage this year. He hasn't. That's a terrible signing. He's okay, but he's a third down guy at this point, and you need a better defensive end. Gross Matos has missed a ton of games. Bosa's now hurt. They have no pass rush whatsoever. Warner has to play because he's on one foot. It's the defense that's letting them down. The offense will come around. They have not drafted well enough in the trenches. The defensive line, when they went in 2019, it was dominant, started to fall apart last year. And then every single year, and Papa used to tell me this all the time, well, they have a lot of confidence in Chris Forster. He's going to make these lines. Well, okay, you get a Dom Pooney, right on. Brendel sucks, all right? On the left side of the line, Trent isn't playing like Trent can play, and I feel bad for what's been happening to him this year, holding out, and what just happened with his wife. But he's not the normal Trent Williams. He's getting older. It happens to everybody. I don't know what they're going to do at left guard long term. Quit telling me about the analytics of McKivitz. I can watch the game. He gets his ass kicked constantly and beat, and other guys have to help out. The offensive line is not near what it needs to be, and the defensive line is not near what it needs to be. So if you were going to say that there's personnel issues, they've done pretty well in most positions. But this maybe it's a philosophical change. Maybe it's just that the right guys weren't there during the draft, or the guys they tried to sign in free agency were too expensive. But the defensive line, which led the way and really was the way in 2019, and trenches in general, when you want to punch somebody in the mouth, that's who the Lions have become. That's who other teams have become. The Chiefs became that after they saw the 49ers. They said offensive and defensive line. Look at the offensive line after Kansas City lost to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. They went out and get Joe Thuney and draft guys and use picks and re-sign Chris Jones and bring in defensive guys. They revamped their entire team. That's what the Rams have done. The Rams got sick of getting their ass kicked by the 49ers, and they fortified their offensive and defensive lines first. And I'm not saying they're great because they've had a bunch of injuries, but they've got players in the trenches that are young and are going to get better and better. Look at what Mike McDonald's doing in Seattle. Now, they need help on their offensive line, but Abe Lucas came back. They have solid tackles. Their defensive line, they picked up a guy from Jacksonville. They drafted Murphy in the first round from Texas. All of a sudden, everybody in this division is doing what the 49ers used to do. Win in the trenches, being physical, punching in your mouth. Look at the teams. Look at the Cowboys who struggle. They don't do that anymore. They had a great offensive line, great defensive line. They suck now. Same record as the Niners. The Niners have forgotten what got them there, the trenches.
Lots of good comments. Nick J says, Lund laying the wood. Niner gang says, Lund about to get Larry into a fight in the Niner locker room with all this real talk. Love it, though.
No,
you know what?
You say it all the time, and then you walk right in.
I wouldn't have anybody else on, than John, and what, I'll live and die with his analysis, and I'll take my chances in the
What
locker
do you
room.
think of the trenches? I mean, isn't that the major?
They're bad.
issue?
I mean, they're really bad. I mean, first of all, they broke the first rule that you should never break according to personnel people, which is you never trade anybody on a defensive line that consistently commands a double team. So you don't trade DeForest Buckner because he commands a double team. It's either you do or you don't. And if you command double teams, like DeForest did, you don't move those guys because they're really, really rare. And then if you ever have a line that has two guys, and that was the hope with Hargrave, is that they, with Bosa and Hargrave, they'd have two guys that command double teams, and then everybody else gets to go one-on-one all night long, and it's a real advantage. But Hargrave's not Hargrave, and they got a guy with a big rep without a lot of game who took a big paycheck and has regressed significantly. Bosa's not the same player that he was, and the guys around them are just guys. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with Leonard Floyd or Malik Collins or Jordan Elliott. They're just guys. They're not. They don't command double teams.
Too big of a role, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Giants always do. They'll get like a player that's like a B- player, but then they'll lead him off, put him in center field, and play him 150 times a year, and then everybody's like, "Dude, that guy sucks." And in reality, no, he doesn't suck. You took a 4 and you're making him be a 10, and he's showing that he's a 4. Or, you'll have baseball scouts say, hey, that guy's a good 3-day-a-week player. And you're the Giants and you're playing him 5 days a week. And then you wonder, why is this guy that other people would play 3 days a week sucking with us? Because you're asking him to do more than he's able to do. It's outside of his comfort zone.
You nailed it. You just nailed it. You really did, because that's the thing. And again, a lot of it has been injuries. I understand that. Guys are thrust into roles. You can use an NBA analogy as well. A guy that's a great role player at 20 minutes is a liability at 28 minutes. I mean, that's just how it is. And you just hit it right on the head. Guys are being forced consistently to play out of their roles. They're just not, and it's again and again and again. So if you had a couple of injuries, you can overcome that. And everybody says, next man up. But then it's again and again and again in every different position. But beyond the injuries, what we're talking about here is they didn't fortify enough. Hargrave hasn't been great since he came. He's never going to play for the 49ers again.
And it was a bad decision. It was a bad decision to get him because it came on the heels of missing all those number ones. So then you depleted your depth and you went for one guy, kind of like the Warriors did in a team sport, on the tail end of missing on like 7 or 8 number ones. So it's like, unless Hargrave, I don't think the Niners really realized how big of a gamble they were taking by going for Hargrave, because you said goodbye to Aziz, bye to Ebukam, bye to Jimmy Ward, bye to Hassan Ridgeway, bye to Emmanuel Mosley. I mean, you kissed off like 6 or 7 guys for Hargrave, and then Hargrave is not very good against the run, and suddenly you're looking up going, what happened to our run D? Why can't we stop anybody?
We can go back to, and look, the thought was right, the execution was wrong, but you don't get a pass for it. They said, okay, we're going to trade Buckner. We're going to get that pick. We're going to get Kinlaw. He's going to fit right in. He's going to be cheaper in 4 years than Buckner was in 1. Right on. Well, what happened is that Kinlaw flamed out. Then they took the money they were going to pay Buckner anyway and gave it to Hargrave. Hargrave gets hurt. And now, as you pointed out a minute ago, Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott and all these guys and Kevin Givens are forced to play more downs than they're comfortable doing. Those are 15 to 20 down guys a game, maybe. And they're forced to play 30 and 40. And all of a sudden you're asking yourself, well, why do we suck? You suck because, look, I understand Armstead was hurt and he was near the end of the line and he wouldn't take a pay cut. I understand that. But to do what they did with Buckner, and here we are talking about it 5 years later, that was criminal, because you were there and you had that defensive line. And the D Ford injury hurt. We go back to that. They've never found a bookend opposite Bosa. They haven't replaced Buckner. It puts more wear and tear on the linebackers because big offensive guards are getting past the line and then, they're getting roughed up. The guys can't tackle for some reason. Young guys are forced to play more downs than they're comfortable with in the secondary. To me, the offense is going to get fixed. There's nothing wrong with Kyle. They got to tweak some things. There's no question about it. I don't know if McCaffrey's ever going to be the same. There's issues on offense, but Ayuk's going to get healthy. I think they'll understand that the line's got to get better. But my long-term concern for the 49ers, as the rest of the NFC West starts to brim with younger talent, is that how are they going to fix this defense? Nick Sorensen's been a disaster. Kyle's an offensive guy. I'm not saying he doesn't care about the defense, but obviously they've let the defensive line go. Warner's getting older and banged up. I don't know that Dre Greenlaw is ever going to play another down. Like, he may come back this year, but long term, I don't think Dre Greenlaw can be a guy that you can afford. Ward's going to be gone because we already know that, because they gave Lenore the money. Hopefully the young safeties. I feel bad for Jair Brown because on that long run they were getting after him on Sunday night, he didn't have any leverage to make the tackle, but still he overran the play. Didn't look good. The safeties have been okay, but not great. Defensively, they got a long way to go. It starts up front, but everybody's getting older and banged up. And it started with, as you said, with letting Buckner go and trying to get Hargrave to take that money and to replace him.
Welcome to the Krug Show, man. We're having a great night. John Lund in the house. Lots of his fans are in the chat. I'm so fired up to have you here, Johnny. Sal says, listened every day to John Lund. We'll continue to. Larry is also the best. Thank goodness for YouTube. And then, of course, people start hearing you, and their first question is BFC Son says, does this guy have a channel? Yeah, exactly. John's really, really good, and you guys are going to want to follow him wherever he goes and whatever he does. And, Johnny, lots of people are inquiring about your plans. Is there anything that you can throw out to them tonight to help them find your content here in the days ahead?
Yeah, if they want to go to at John Lund Radio on Twitter, I'll keep you updated on everything. I put a few posts up today. I'm going to start tomorrow morning at 8. And look, everybody owes it to you, man, because I remember a couple of years ago, I saw you out at one of your kids' baseball games at Northgate High, where both of our kids went. And
yeah,
and you were kicking around going, man, I'm going to do this YouTube thing. And really nobody had done it. I mean, there's other guys all around the country, Jason Puckett in Seattle, and I know Damon's doing stuff, and I'm going to start doing stuff. And, it's a fun new world because you can say what you want and do what you want. And I know you show up at Niners HQ after you say what you say, but the thing is just to take a peek behind the curtain, and you know this as well as I do. When you're on the flagship of the 49ers, there's a game to be played. I'm sorry, we can't sit there and just rail every single day. We can tell you the truth, but there's a lot of things behind the scenes, especially when I was working with Greg, that you just can't say on the air. You just can't, because you have a relationship to maintain. You just can't say everything you want or know about the Giants because you have a relationship to maintain. When you're your own boss, as you've done such a tremendous job of being, you can let her rip. Now, I'm not saying that you can get personal. I've always had that in 25 years that I've been doing this. I never get personal on somebody. There's plenty between the lines that we can talk about. I'm not unfair to somebody, but I think you and I both know, when we're watching sports, as long as we've done this and covered this and instincts as a reporter and all those kind of things, we know when someone's BS and we know when someone's not giving effort. We know, and we can say those things, where a lot of times, especially when I was working with Greg and it was the 49ers, you just couldn't say everything that you wanted to say. And so now it's this whole new world that, as long as you're fair, you keep it between the lines, you can pretty much say whatever you want. And there's no way that teams can attack you. I've over my years, the bigger the market, the more you can say. These small markets, they try to get after you and, maybe limit what you can say or do. But generally speaking, major markets, they don't do that. So you can really let her rip. And I know you've done a great job of it. And then you go, and here's the best part of it. And this is when you're a professional like you are, you go into the locker room and you face what you said. You go. And
the only way to do it.
You sit front row every time Kyle Shanahan has a press conference. You ask him tough questions. You show up again. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And here's the bottom line. Once people get to know you, your character as a man or as a media person, then all of a sudden it's not, hey, this guy's not trying to get us, but he's also not one of us. He's not on our team. But at the same time, he's not trying to sink our team. I want to ask tough questions, but I'm not out there to embarrass any player. I'm not out there to embarrass any coach. But I do think we have to seek the truth out sometimes. Jason PDSI says Lund is a fine bottle of champagne that has been shaken up and uncorked.
I'm more of like a cheap bottle of Ripple. I'm really not a fine bottle of champagne. As you can see, I'm kind of a mess. I think I've been in these clothes all day. I haven't left this studio once.
We're both a couple bottles of T-Bird.
Right. That's it, man. What's the price?
Digital Drew, who's in the chat. Digital Drew is a big fan. He works on the video game. He's one of the creators and the originators of the video game Mortal Kombat, and he works out of Chicago. and he's just checked in where it is 11:27 Central Time. He says Lund is a monster. Wonderful get. Make it every Monday, Krug. Hey, we're gonna have John on as much as we possibly can. Johnny and I go way back. I coached his kid in Little League. He was the youngest kid on the team. And I remember one kid just whipped, threw a fastball that went right by his chin. And at the time, I don't think John's kid is really unique. He was the youngest kid on the team, but not an ounce of fear. I mean, no fear. Some kids are constantly moving out of the box. They fear everything. They're constantly afraid. Your kid was the youngest kid on the team. Just to put it in perspective, I believe him and Kevin were on the same team.
Yeah.
And Kevin is graduated college and George is a second-year student, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So, I mean,
what ended up happening was we had moved. I don't know. We had been here a year or two. I think he was like 7 or 8. I think he had played 1 year at T-ball, and I think they accidentally put him on your team, which, by the way, was the Dodgers. And Krug would never be dead in the hat. All the other coaches were in Dodgers hat, but Krug wouldn't do it. And so he was put in the wrong league, and so then we put him down a level, and then everything was cool. But yeah, we lived.
And he made varsity baseball. Your kid played varsity baseball at Northgate, and any kid that I coach that makes varsity baseball, I view that as, I had a hand in that, man. When I saw that kid playing varsity baseball, and I only saw a few of his games, but every time I saw him, I thought to myself, I had a hand in that, man. I had a hand in that.
No, dude,
so it's very cool.
He played a couple of games, and anyway, all of us grew up together. He's gonna be 21 next month. Your kid's already past that age. He's graduated college. It flies, man.
It is amazing, dude. But I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that we're doing this, and I'm fired up. Let's go to Richard Sherman. Sherman stopped by, and I'm going to share Kev's Twitter here because Kev tweeted this out. And this is Sherman on X talking a little bit. First, let's hear from Sherman. He talks first about the Niners offensive line. We'll play this, and then we can react to it. Here's Richard Sherman on the Richard Sherman.
I'm going to ask a tough question, and it pertains to the future of the San Francisco 49ers. It's been gut punch after gut punch after gut punch this season between the tight losses and the injuries to key players. Now we see CMC's injury. Now the looming questions of having to pay Brock Purdy and what that does to salary cap space. We talked about this championship window for the last 6-7 years. Do you think this game will be the dagger in the San Francisco 49ers future championship aspirations in terms of this talent base that they have in-house right now, these key role players that are all having to get paid now?
No, I don't know if this is going to be the end of it. It's going to be a real challenge going forward, and it's going to be up to the scouting department and the front office, and a front office in which they've lost a lot of people. They've lost Adam Peters, they've lost Martin Mayhew, they've lost so many guys to become GMs other places, and that's really cool when you think about it. You're like, hey man, look at this, what a franchise. How great you have to be to lose talent to be GMs elsewhere, but it also affects the quality of the staff that you have, and they've elevated and they've tried to continue that, and this is going to be their greatest challenge this year, to find some young guys to fill those gaps. You're going to have to find some young offensive linemen that have to play at a really high level. They found the right guard in Pooney. I think that's going to be around for a while, but you're going to have to find likely another center. I'm not sure Brendel is the answer long term. You're probably going to have to find another young left guard to compete at that spot. You're going to have to find heir apparent for Trent Williams whenever he decides to retire.
So there you go. You got a little bit of Richard Sherman there talking about the Niners offensive line.
Right.
He is absolutely right. I mean, they have to rebuild that thing.
There's a guy that presided over the end of the Seahawks era. There's a guy that left after 2019 of the 49ers. He's seen the end, and he not only is he 100% correct, but he also pointed out the areas in which they need help. And it was just something you and I were just talking about, which is the trenches. That's where everything starts. And look, we go back, you and I, and everybody's a 49er fan, and we talk about Kittle in the 5th round and Warner in the 3rd round, and you go on and on and on. And he did mention Pooney, but that's what built this great team to what they were. But the problem's going to be now they're getting older. Now they're getting more injured. And this is where it becomes difficult. And we saw this with the Warriors, and the thing I guess that bothers me the most is people are already putting the nails in the coffin of the 49ers. If you want to do that for this season, have at it. I'll give you the hammer and I'll give you the nails. It's over. Like, we don't need, I heard George Kittle after the game say, well, if we win out, like, you've lost all the games in the division. You're not going to win out. You got tons of injuries. This is not your year. It's like 2020. But in terms of the long, the long view of this whole thing, is Renardo Green a guy, or is he a big time player? Is this Pooney? Is this really what he's going to be? I mean, they had a draft this year that could elevate them, but it's not just one. You know this better than anybody. When Seattle did it, when the Niners did it the first time with Harbaugh and the second time in the Shanahan and Lynch era, they did it with about 2 or 3 or 4 in a row. That's what it has to be. You got to nail it and nail it and nail it and nail it. And that's cheap labor that's playing well. And all of a sudden you're seeing that. That's why the Rams got better so much faster. They nailed all these guys. They got it in the early rounds. Seattle's doing the same thing. These teams, Detroit has done it. I mean, what Holmes has done and Dan Campbell have done in Detroit, that's no joke. That's no accident. It was draft after draft after draft. And then you take select free agents. But to say, the one thing that bothers me right now, and the national media loves to do this, they want to bury the Warriors and bury the Spurs and bury the Patriots and bury the Bulls and bury the dynasties before they're done. They're done this year. But I don't know that they're done long term, because can they get healthy? I think they can. The division is still, even next year, not great. They still need another draft or two, Seattle and the Rams. So, yeah, they're buried this year. But I agree with Sherm. They've got to hit a bunch of drafts in a row to keep this thing going. But I don't necessarily think they're buried and it's over. I just think for this season it is. But they've got to get some cheaper talent, because Krueger in this offseason, they're going to lose Ward. They might lose Greenlaw. They might lose Hargrave. They're going to have to make some really tough decisions. I thought it was going to be Kittle too. They cannot lose George Kittle in any way, shape, or form, but they're going to have to make some tough decisions. They're not buried for good, but they're buried for the season.
All right, let's hit better. Kev has told me, man, we got to hit better. We should have hit it earlier. This live stream sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. And we've done it 5 times already this year. So download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners and get the first deposit matched up to $200. And we gave away a Fred Warner jersey. I don't have the announcement of who exactly got it, but the contest ended at the end of the month of November. And thanks to everybody who participated. And we'll give you that name here in a day or so when I get it. But let's go to Better, and we're going to look ahead to the Thursday night tilts this week. This is the rematch of Lions-Packers from Lambeau, that the Lions actually went to Lambeau and slapped the Pack around. So let's take a look at some of these projections. Let me see Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs has 2 projections. Let's see what they are. So it's 66.5 rushing yards or 17.5 longest run. I like the 17.5 longest run. He's got an 18-yard run in him for sure. So let's go there. Let's go more than 17.5 for Jahmyr. Are any of the Packers or Lions individuals intriguing to you, John? We can call up any of these.
You know what's tough about the Packers is they have all these.
They got a myriad of guys.
Right? I mean, you look at the Lions, you can tell which guys, like you just mentioned, Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra or somebody like that. Montgomery's going to get into the end zone once, maybe twice. But, man, the Packers are a tough team. Now, you want to get Josh Jacobs? Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, let's take a look at Jacobs.
As far as the receivers, God, you don't know who's going to go off of the Packers.
I know. One week it's Christian Watson. Next week it's Jaden Reed. They're a very difficult team to predict. Okay, so you can go Jacobs 66.5 rush yards. So you get 67, you go more. 2.5 receptions, 10.5 receiving, or 16.5 receiving yards.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
14.5. You like 17 receiving yards for Jacobs?
Well, he hasn't done as much this year with the Packers, but with the Raiders and especially at Alabama, you know the draft better than anybody. I mean, he could catch the football out of the backfield a lot. He did it with the Raiders. He did it at Alabama.
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that, because that's also indoors. It's not going to be an outdoor game. This is an indoor game, so let's go with that. Let's go with over 16.5 receiving yards. And let's see. We can go either way now. We can go Lions, or you got to go one of each. All right, let's go Amon-Ra. Where's Amon-Ra? Let's see what he's got. Amon-Ra, you can go 70.5 receiving yards. That seems right on it. That's a little high. That's a little high.
Nice.
How about Goff? How about Goff? Let's take a look at Goff. He's got 2 projections. He's got 242.5 passing yards. He's got 1.5 passing touchdowns.
I'd probably go over the touchdowns. I don't know about the yards.
I
Again,
agree. I like more. He's got 2 touchdowns in him for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they got all kinds of weapons. Let's go 2 touchdowns. Let's wager. Let's go. We got 3 categories right there. We got Jahmyr Gibbs, and we place our wager. We're submitting, and we have 3 pick entry to win $50. So these are our 3 picks. We have Gibbs more. He's got to have an 18-yard run. Jacobs has got to have a 17 yards receiving, and Goff's got to have 2 touchdown passes. If he does that, we bet $10. We get 5-1. We'll win $50. So thanks to Better. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. And thanks to Better for being a proud sponsor of the Krueger Show. And I'm a big fan of Better, guys. So sign up, and you're going to really love it. Okay, a couple more topics.
By the way, the graphics are on fire, man. Is that Kevin? The graphics are on fire.
Yes.
Nobody has better graphics than you.
I mean, he's moving stuff around. He's in the back room. I mean, it's an unbelievable. It's an unbelievable extravaganza. All right, here's a question I want to ask you. Oh, first of all, well, we'll skip that second Sherman one. Let's get on to this question. How do you feel, John, about Brock Purdy? And I asked that because he's struggled. He's having to shoulder a lot of the load. He's not Josh Allen, but there's no real shame in that. He was billed as better than Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance, and he's absolutely better than Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance, but he's not Josh Allen. He's not Mahomes. He's not Lamar. He's not Joe Burrow. And yet I think the Niners ought to sign him long term. But then I look at Miami. They paid Tua Tagovailoa $53 million. Without Tua, they're an awful football team. With him, they're quite a bit of a football team. So maybe it isn't the stupidest thing to pay a good quarterback if you have one. But then the question is, I saw Cowherd had a video the other day, and he's like, of the last 21 quarterbacks to win on Super Bowl Sunday, 18 of the 21 are either Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers. And let's make no mistake about it. Brock Purdy is not a future Hall of Famer. He's a solid quarterback, but he's not a Hall of Famer, I don't think. So I would want to sign Purdy, but I've heard people say, hey, you know what? Let him play it out. Don't sign him this year. Other people say, you know what, you're going to have to pay him $50+ million. You might as well pay him now. You're going to pay him less today than you are tomorrow. Did waiting help them save money on any of their other big name guys? Not really. So there's that question. I guess the bigger question would be this. If you ran the Niners, who is in next year's 49er quarterback room? Is Purdy in there? Is he not? And if he's in there, who's in there with him?
Well, a couple of things. We all know this. I don't know why God didn't create more quarterbacks, but he just didn't. It's the hardest position to fill, and it's not even close. And really, there's not 32 of them. There's not 20 of them. There might be 10 of them, really, and there's really 5 elite. So, goalies in hockey maybe are a little bit comparable. You can find offensive tackles. You can find pass rushers. You can find corners. You can find hitters. You can find hockey players. You can find NBA scorers. I don't know why you can't find quarterbacks. You just can't. So what happens is their value every single year in the draft, as you well know, like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck and any of these guys who are probably the 10th or 20th prospect in the draft are going to be taken in the top 5. It's just going to be the way it's going to be. And most are going to fail. And that's just the position. So when you get one that is great, you can't let them leave the building. I don't know how, like Drew Brees at one point left the building. That is so rare. But when you get a good one, you have to pay him because there's so few. That's why I had an issue with Brandon Ayuk. You can find receivers. He's holding you hostage. Do you really have to give him $30 million? Because there's 10 guys coming out in the draft that are probably as good and will be at some point, but there's never enough quarterbacks. So the 49ers are in this really difficult spot where is Brock Purdy worth $50 or $60 million a year? He is not. Teams have figured him out. He's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I said earlier, I think he's Jared Goff-ish. In an indoor stadium with great weapons, Jared Goff might be able to win you a Super Bowl. Maybe, maybe not. Same thing with Brock Purdy. took the Chiefs to overtime, but he couldn't get it done. Just like Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't hit, Sanders for that one touchdown. It's just the way it goes. The Patrick Mahomes and, like you said, the elite Hall of Fame quarterbacks and the Bradys and everybody else, they find a way to win the Super Bowl because that's what it takes in the last moments to do those kind of things over and over. And I don't think Brock Purdy can do that on a consistent basis, and I don't think he can do it with less weapons, which is probably what he's going to have to deal with. In the next few years, he's going to have enough offensive weapons. Keep Jennings around. Persaw's better. Mason, they're always finding those players. Maybe they can upgrade their offensive line. They need to. But is Brock Purdy going to be that guy that you're going to win a Super Bowl because of him? No. But what are your options, Krug? Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, draft another guy. We saw with Trey Lance how well that did. I mean, Trey Lance was the most ill-prepared quarterback to enter the league in the last 20 years. He hardly played in high school or college, and Kyle Shanahan thought, what a great idea. That's what we're dealing with. Kyle knows what he's doing. It's just Trey Lance fooled him. So it's the most difficult position, and when you have a good one, let alone a great one, you have no choice but to pay them market value. But the problem with that, as you know, is then you start losing guys off your defense. You become the old Seahawks. Wilson is a third rounder. Russell Wilson gets paid. You lose Cam Chancellor. You lose Earl Thomas. You lose Cliff Averill. All of a sudden, you're not that good anymore because you had to pay the quarterback $50 million. They had a window of opportunity with a 7th round salary to win us a Super Bowl, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call as far as what to do at the quarterback spot going forward, right? Because Brock Purdy's better than what you had, and he's better than a lot of quarterbacks, but he's also not elite. And as I just quoted you, most of the time it takes an elite type quarterback to win the Super Bowl. So what do? Okay, so I'm not getting rid of good because he's not great when I don't have anybody better to go to. So that's one. So I'm bringing Brock Purdy back. If I want him, if some people will say, hey, don't pay him this year, let him wait it out. Okay, maybe that's the route to go. Maybe if he's willing to take a below market rate and he's not willing to play for $50 million, maybe if he's willing to take, 3 years, $100 million or something like that, and something more reasonable. But I doubt Kyle Strongton, his agent out of Nashville, is going to do that. So I guess my thought would be this. I bring back Brock Purdy because he's the best quarterback I have. But I also think it's important that you keep looking for a great quarterback because I think for two reasons. One, because you need a great quarterback to win. And two, because if you can land a second quarterback, you can trade that quarterback in a league where there's not nearly enough for oftentimes a bevy of picks that will help you rebuild faster. So, like if it was up to me and I could pick next year's quarterback room, I got Brock Purdy in there. I'm kissing off Dobbs and I'm kissing off Brandon Allen because I can't afford them anymore. I can't afford veteran quarterbacks making millions. So I got Purdy as my starter. I got Tanner Mordecai coming back, and I do like Tanner Mordecai. And then I'm going into the draft, and I'm not going to draft anybody in day 1 or day 2. But I like Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. I really like Haynes King from Georgia Tech. They're day 3 quarterbacks. I would just keep drafting a day 3 quarterback every year until I hit one. And then I would just go with Purdy until I can find somebody better. That would be my approach. One, because you're still taking a shot at trying to find, the superstar quarterback, albeit not in the first couple rounds. And history kind of shows that those guys do happen to pop up sometimes. It's low percentage, but it can happen. And then why get rid of Brock, right now? The only other thing I'd be interested in is looking at Baker, looking at Darnold. You know what? You might be time to start looking at these quarterbacks, not for what they are, but what potentially they could be. Like if all of a sudden you could get Zach Wilson, you might want to consider it. If you could get Mac Jones, you might want to consider it. If there's a quarterback that you liked in the draft and he bombed in his first stop and you think you can fix him, that might be the route to go after watching Darnold and Baker. What do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more. They're going to pay Brock Purdy because they really have no choice. In the quarterback room, though, I agree with you. Whether you liked Zach Wilson, which I didn't at a BYU because they played a really soft schedule and he had a veteran offensive line and never got hit. Whether you like Mac Jones, which apparently the 49ers did. I think I was surprised, to be honest with you. You saw where Daniel Jones went. I don't know why so much was being made of that. He's not going to play this year. He hasn't played really well, but because he was a New York quarterback, they made a big deal. But he went to Minnesota so he could learn under Kevin O'Connell, and so in an atmosphere that is not where he gets thrust into the game, and that's why we're seeing these guys. These guys are mentally getting beat down, and then they're coming back because they actually can play. Like you said, Darnold can play, and Geno Smith can play, and Baker can play, but they just can't be thrust in there. But in the microwave society we live in right now, we're paying you a ton of money. We're a first-round pick. The owner gets pissed off, throw the guy in there. He's not prepared. He gets mentally whipped. Everybody says he sucks. He's looking on social media. He loses all his confidence, and all of a sudden he's terrible. Well, if you can give guys, put them in a nurturing situation like Kyle Shanahan can give them, or like Sean Payton has given Bo Nix, or some of these offensive guys who said, Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, I think you can rehab these guys if they can play. Trey Lance can't be rehabbed because Lance can't play. And that goes to the bigger picture of the NFL has got to figure out a better way to develop quarterbacks, because most are not ready to play. Like Shedeur Sanders next year. Everybody thinks he's going to save a franchise. I'm scared as hell of Shedeur Sanders. I think he's got a bad attitude. I think he thinks he knows everything. I think he's going to be very difficult to coach. Cam Ward's the same guy that struggled at times at Washington State. I watched a ton of Cam Ward. He's had a good season at Miami, but I don't think he's going to come into the league and light it on fire. These guys have got to be in great situations, and because these teams are drafting at the first of the draft and don't have offensive linemen and don't have great situations, these guys lose their confidence. So you hit it right on the head. It is so difficult to find these guys and that they've played enough football. Look, Bo Nix started 61 games, man, and went to a situation with Sean Payton, and they have talent and they have a decent defense. It doesn't surprise me that he's played well. He's gotten him to do the things he does well. He was accurate at Oregon over 70%. He started 61 games. He went, okay, this is what I'm going to do with this guy. I think that Michael Penix is going to be good in Atlanta because he's had a couple of years. Mahomes sat a year. If you can give these guys the luxury, they can play. It's just that going back to Purdy for a minute, he scares the hell out of me, man. And I would defer to your expertise here, because he's regressing and teams are figuring him out, and there's certain places he wants to go with the ball. Things are not going to be perfect. And I'm throwing out Buffalo. I'm throwing out bad weather games. I'm throwing out that kind of stuff. But teams, what they do is, and you know this, so the teams in the division take the offseason and they say, how are we going to stop these teams that are beating us? So they've looked at Kyle's offense again and again and again, and they've looked at Purdy again and again and again. And then you got a guy like Mike McDonald in there, and you get good minds in there. And these guys, then they give you a blueprint on how to beat them, like Kansas City did in the Super Bowl. Hell, every team has run some version if they could. Most don't have the personnel, but they've done something in a man coverage way or mixing things up to confuse Brock Purdy, and he just hasn't been the same guy. And now you don't have the running game. You have all their injuries, and that's been part of the major issue. They've got to give Brock Purdy $50 or $60 million. I understand that. But, man, he scares me. I mean, what do you think of the team?
I mean, okay, so he's, I remember Billick used to say the hardest thing to evaluate in pro football is the quarterback versus what's going on around the quarterback. And I think that's really true. And, like, just take Brock Purdy right now and take him off the Niners and take Jalen Hurts off the Eagles and just put Brock Purdy in the Eagles. And now you got Saquon Barkley and a big physical running game and some really game receivers and a quarterback that makes good decisions and a damn good defense. If you put Brock Purdy on the Eagles right now, I love their chances of winning the Super Bowl.
Be able to do that? That's what I'm saying with Goff. I think that Purdy is Goff.
Goff's in a great spot,
and
yeah.
Goff's got maybe the best offensive weapons going right now. He's got a pretty good defense. They lost Hutchinson, so they're not quite as good. But, they've got a lot going for them. They're playing most of their games, not only because they're at home indoors, but they got a very favorable schedule this year, playing a lot of games indoors or in better weather. So if everything's perfect for Jared Goff is going to be great. The great ones can win regardless. And there's only, honestly, what is there, 2 or 3 of those? Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and then the list gets really short. They can win despite anything. I don't expect Brock Purdy to be that, but Brock Purdy now, and I'm not into rankings and lists, and I don't give a damn what anybody says on Twitter. I don't care what Stephen A. Smith screams about somebody. I don't care about any of that kind of stuff. It's just when you watch the game, I see teams figuring Brock Purdy out. And again, I hate when people say there's a reason why he was a 7th rounder, but he's a little small. His arm's a little weak. There's certain things that Brock either doesn't see or can't get the ball to certain spots. I love Brock, man. He's a gamer. He works hard. He's a great kid. Both you and I have interviewed him multiple times. He's a great kid. But when it's not perfect around Brock and they've had the injury, like Debo's gone. Debo's going to be gone next year. If it's Jennings next year and Pearsall steps up and Ayuk is back and hopefully McCaffrey and you got Mason and you improve that offensive line, I think that Brock Purdy will be fine for this team. But fine for this team doesn't mean going into the playoffs and winning 10 games. It means winning a Super Bowl or bust. That's what the 49ers are. That's their goal. Is he that? Is he that guy?
I think you can win with him. I think he's good enough to win with if you can surround him with a big line and run the ball and then just ask him to make, certain plays. If you're going to drop back 35 times a game and fling it all over the yard, I don't think this is the guy. But if you can build a nice line around him, build a fortress, have a good defense, run the ball, I think this guy can play such efficient football where the way that Russell Wilson won a ring, I think this guy can win a ring. But it's going to take, but now what complicates things is their equation is bogging down because CMC's got double Achilles and now a PCL injury. Ayuk's got a very serious knee injury and may not ever be the same and probably doesn't play it down next year. Debo looks like he's lost a lot of his acceleration. You invested a number 1 pick in Ricky Pearsall. He has been literally shut out for a month. So, if you could tell me that CMC and Ayuk and Debo and Pearsall were all going to be good, then I feel a lot better about Brock. But if in reality, Ayuk, Debo, CMC, and Pearsall are going to amount to 0, which right now, if I was betting, I would bet on that more than I would bet that those guys all return to form. Then I don't feel as good. So, add receiver and weapons to the 49ers list of, their to-do list of the offseason. One of the questions that was brought up is a good one here. I'm going to share the screen on this one. This is also Cowherd and our good friend John Middlecoff. And Middlecoff's done so well for himself with his volume. He's done well. And here is a little bit of Cowherd, then a little bit of Middlecoff. Listen to what they both advocate. Cowherd's going to advocate the Niners need like a franchise reset. But then Middlecoff advocates something that many Niner fans at the beginning of the year would have thought be the unthinkable. Listen to this.
Let's start with Green Bay 38, San Francisco 10. So, you knew it was trouble. Bosa out, Brock Purdy out, Trent out. But as I was watching this, it was more than that. Because, Green Bay gave them opportunities. I think you have to have a hard look in the mirror. And it's hard in the NFL when you still have really good people in the locker room. I think this franchise needs a complete reboot. If you look at the Detroits, the Green Bays, Buffalo, Kansas City, the Chargers are up and coming. San Francisco is like an old fighter, John. They're like an old boxer. Last year, they were hanging on, had one last good fight. Stop drafting receivers, rebuild the O-lines and D-lines. Bosa's hurt, Kittle's hurt, McCaffrey's hurt. You know this organization well, but listen, Green Bay was going to win this game. You could tell 2 series in. I think San Francisco has to hyper-aggressively reboot the franchise.
Well, it's tough when you're paying all these guys all this money. They've recently invested. I think the best thing that could happen to them, because they're not making the playoffs, keep losing these games. I said, today was not a great day for Dallas. Like, they're not going to the playoffs. You win, it ruins your draft position. If you're the 49ers, you want to be drafting 7th, not 15th, right? Because we know quarterbacks usually go, and that gives you an opportunity to get one of the best players on the board. They play Buffalo next week. That's a loss. The Rams, they still play the Cardinals. Like, they could lose these games, and I would imagine they do. So, I think you're looking at best a 7-win team, and I think right now, not winning maybe one more game the rest of the season. This Purdy thing, it was well reported today, like they're not even sure what's going on. Bosa hurt one hip, then he hurt another. Trent's just a weathered, older player. This team, you know what they need? They kind of need to get bounced in the first round. or not even make it to the first round of the playoffs and get extra time off and get to reset. It happened to the Warriors. Remember, they had 2020 was really rough couple years. Then they were fresh, then they won a championship.
Well, remember, the Niners' last Super Bowl loss went
Terrible.
6-10, were injury ravaged.
So to me, the best, easiest way for them to get players, they're not going to have a lot of cap space because of all the big cap, hits they have with players, is to have like the 8th pick in the draft. Because it's not just the first round, it's every round. And they've proven to be able to draft really well in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. When you're drafting in the top 10, there aren't really many excuses to miss like when they're drafting in the late 20s. So I think the best case scenario, roll out the team they're rolling out, and their schedule's hard. I mean, they still play the Dolphins, who look good right now. Obviously, they got the Bills next week. They're just going to naturally lose a lot of games, which I think is really going to benefit them long term.
What do you think, John? I mean, Middlecoff is basically saying tank the rest of the year. As he said, they may not need to really tank because they're already losing all these games. Colin says they need a dramatic franchise reset. Should the Niners do what John is saying, play the kids, shelve the injured vets, lose out, go for maybe a top 10 pick? They currently sit 14 in round 1. If they lost out, they probably could get to like 7 or 8. But then I guess the question is, who do you target? I mean, who do you want? I would say what's really important, you got to get a great player. It doesn't have to be a quarterback. I mean, Cam Ward's going to go in the top 10. But you got Quinn Ewers. I mean, it doesn't have to be a quarterback though. It could be an offensive tackle, Will Campbell, LSU, Emory Jones. It could be a running back, Ashton Gianti. It could be a receiver, Tedoroa McMillan. It could be a free safety like Malachi Starks. It could be a big defensive tackle, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan. Linebacker, Jalen Walker from Florida State's amazing. There's some edge players. What do you think? I mean, do they need a hyper reboot, as Colin says? Should they lose out, as Middlecoff says? Is it worthy of is the difference between 8 and 14 or 8 and 15 enough to make you change the way you finish out this year?
Might be. If you're going to go out and take Javon Kinlaw, then it's not. I mean, that's where they took him. They were at 13, traded back with Tampa, who took Tristan Wirfs, and they took Kinlaw at 14. You've got to hit these picks, whether they're in the first round, second round, third round. 49ers done great in the mid rounds and not so much in the first round outside of Nick Bosa under this current regime. But before we get to draft talk, just to what those guys both said, I have no issue with them saying they're going to tank. They're going to do it because Fred Warner has a broken ankle and might as well sit out, and Bosa's hurt and he might as well sit out. Look, it's over for the year. So they're right in the respect, because we've seen it again and again. You're putting a lot of mileage on the tires when you go and play in these playoff games, and you can't just throw your shoes on the field and think. And then everything that's happened off the field, from the holdouts to the tragedies that have happened with Ward and now Trent Williams and his family, all these things, Ricky Pearsall getting shot, these are all emotional things, and it's taking their toll. I'm not making an excuse. It's an explanation. So that's what's happened. Now, as far as the future is concerned, it's really easy to beat on a team when they're down. I remember 2020, the same kind of talk, and Jimmy's got to go, and this guy's got to go, and that guy's too old, and this guy's no good, and this guy's always hurt. I get it. They're older than that team, and they're more expensive than that team. Colin's got a point there. But if you look at this team from a talent standpoint, all right, next year, who's going to return? Debo's not going to return. But you get over ACLs. Pearsall should be better in the second year. That's when you take your jump. He got shot. There's all these things. He didn't even have camp. I'm not making excuses. He's going to be a player. George Kittle's going to return. You and I have talked about this. Fred Warner's going to get healthy again. The secondary's got a lot of nice young pieces, even without Ward, and they got Lenore for long term. They got enough offensively. Kyle Shanahan's a hell of a good coach who's not having a great year. They're going to replace their defensive coordinator and special teams guy. So, look, that's a lot of moving pieces, and it's a lot of guys to change. I understand that. But if you look at core talent of the 49ers when they are healthy, they're still good. They need to concentrate in the offseason on the offensive and defensive lines. Trent's not going to play forever, and I hate to say this because he's got massive arms and will wrap them around me like an anaconda and kill me the next time I see him, but he's not playing as well. And Banks was a second-round pick who hasn't worked out. And Richard Sherman's right. Brendel stinks at center. And Pooney, they got lucky, and they got it in. Honestly, I don't know what McKivitz does half the time at right tackle. So they've got one really good young offensive lineman, and they have one really good defensive lineman. That ain't getting it done. So if you concentrate what money you have and your draft capital that Middlecoff speaks of in the trenches, and then Warner comes back and Greenlaw comes back, and you got a good young secondary, Kyle's going to handle the offense. They'll score enough. You got to look at your division first. Seattle's up and coming, there's no question, but Geno Smith is 34. They've still got a ways to go. The Rams still have a ways to go. I never trust the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. So if we start next year with a healthy team, if the 49ers do, it's not we, I don't play for them, they're still the favorites in the NFC West. And then at that point, you never know. Look, I think the Lions have a nice young core that's going to be a pain in the ass forever. The Eagles, remember the Eagles last year? What the hell is going on with them? And they've got major problems. The Eagles are I think going to the Super Bowl, their defense is amazing. Yeah. And now that Hutchinson's gone for the Lions, they're not getting to the passers. Zadarius Smith's not the answer. The Eagles are the best team in the NFC. A year ago, we thought they were done, and Kelsey retires. Oh, my God. They bring in Vic Fangio. They fix the defense, and all of a sudden, Saquon Barkley becomes what CMC was last year, and they're the Super Bowl favorites. So, look, put the dirt on the 49ers this year all you want. Enjoy it, laugh, have a good time. Next year, with this group and with Kyle and with John and the type of talent they still have, they have another run in them. They're not done yet.
I saw this today, and it scared the hell out of me. And this is Chase Sr., who I like. I mean, I have him on the show. I stream with him. I know you don't know Chase, but he's actually a decent content creator. But this is the video that he put out, and he's not the only one who said this. Listen to this, and we'll react to this one. This is Chase talking about the Niners in the offseason here. Here we go.
I just want to prepare everybody for this. Do not be surprised if the San Francisco 49ers decide to pursue Kirk Cousins this offseason. Kyle Shanahan has tried to get him before. He really liked him in Washington. He runs the scheme, and he's a fan of how he plays the quarterback position. And Kirk Cousins would be able to come to San Francisco and run Kyle Shanahan's offense with a lot of familiarity. Of course, this would happen if the 49ers are not sold on Brock Purdy being their future franchise quarterback. And as we know, he's going into the final year of his contract next year and could look for $50 to $60 million per season. Going into the weekend, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN had reported that Cousins' future with the Atlanta Falcons rides on the next 6 games, and his results have been pretty good but not optimal. Well, what did Kirk Cousins do yesterday with Atlanta? He threw 4 interceptions in that game against the Los Angeles Chargers. So if Cousins and Atlanta can come to an agreement to get him shipped out, look for the Niners to pursue him.
Wow. What do you think? If it came down to – oh, wait a second. Wait. Hold on. Kill the noise on this. What would you think if the Niners went after Cousins? I mean, this has been rumored forever. Right. Do you think I would have thought once Purdy took off and Cousins got paid that was it, and that that conversation was done. But is after a down year from Brock, kind of a down year for the Niners, is Shanahan going to panic and go to somebody like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or something like that? I'm a little fearful of. In fact, we got this super chat from Mufasa who says, "Bring Aaron Rodgers to the Bay." And of course the same guy said, "Sign Mac Jones ASAP."
No, we've seen these guys like Steph Curry and LeBron James and Tom Brady and all these guys who keep their bodies in tip-top shape, extend and fight off Father Time. When you look at Aaron Rodgers, I see Ken Stabler. I mean, this guy's – look, I'm not going to make fun of him because I do the same things he does, but I'm not a professional athlete. He looks like he abuses his body. He's gray. He can't move. He's got a ton of injuries. He's a pain in the ass. I mean, I don't know why you'd bring Aaron Rodgers in. He's not good anymore. He's just not. He doesn't keep up his body like that. He doesn't. He's bad in the locker room. Teammates. He's a pain. Yeah,
he's all about himself in the pocket. He won't take a hit. He doesn't hang in against the rush anymore.
Kyle's got a massive ego, and so does Aaron Rodgers. I just don't see the fit. You got to look at the fit there. So I don't think Rodgers is coming. As far as Cousins, even if they could work beyond the finances, which again, teams will take big hits if they just think it's wrong. And they do have Michael Penix sitting there. He'd have a $40 million cap hit that the Falcons would have to eat, and they probably would because Penix doesn't make any money. So from that standpoint, they could. I mean, Penix was the 8th overall pick. He does make some money, but it's not commensurate to what a top quarterback makes. So they could do that. But again, with general managers, coaches,
He's got
people
67%, Johnny, 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions for Cousins this year.
He hasn't. And look, maybe some of it is the Achilles and he's coming back from it. I haven't watched a ton of the Falcons over the last few weeks. I did early in the season to see how Cousins looked, and he wasn't moving well. But the best way to predict what someone in a position of power in sports is going to do in the future is look at their past. They could have had Aaron Rodgers. They didn't want him. They could have had Tom Brady. They didn't want him. That really hasn't been Kyle's MO, is to bring in a veteran. And I say this about Jerry Jones because I worked in Dallas years ago. Everyone's talking about Belichick and this coach and that coach and all these big name coaches. Jerry Jones doesn't want an egomaniac coach. He wants to run it all. He wants to get all the press. He's never, ever again going to bring in an ego guy. I was there when Bill Parcells was there. He fought famously with Parcells just like he did Jimmy Jones, and Parcells couldn't wait to get the hell out of there because of because of Jerry's ego. Kyle Shanahan would have to compete with an egotistical veteran quarterback who says, I got this, Kyle. It's Kyle's offense. Kyle gets pissed when Brock doesn't run it his way. He couldn't stand when Trey Lance left the pocket early. It's Kyle's offense. You run it like Kyle wants it to be run. You go through your progressions. Kyle has mapped it out. He's the mad scientist. He doesn't want an egotistical quarterback to come in and say, I got this. Let's change the offense for me. That's not what Kyle wants to do. It makes sense in the fantasy football way, and that's how a lot of people look at this thing. But if you've done what you and I have done for so long, you understand the chemistry and the type of things, and you just got to look at history. Kyle's had a chance to bring in big-name quarterbacks. Brady could still play. At the point that they could have brought in Rodgers, he could still play. Not like now, but is Kyle's ego going to mesh with another ego? I just don't see it. They've talked. I understand the premise because Kirk Cousins and Kyle have this long relationship, but they've tried 2 or 3 times. Cousins looks washed. He's 37 years old, and you're going to give up on, let me get this straight, you're going to give up on, 23, 24-year-old Brock Purdy to bring in 37-year-old Kirk Cousins? I don't see it.
No, I like my plan, which is stay with Brock, but keep drafting quarterbacks and guys that you like and create roster spots for them and develop them.
Sam Darnold's too good. I could see Darnold with the Raiders next year if they don't get one of the quarterbacks, whoever falls out enough to not get one of those young quarterbacks. But you hit this on the head a little bit earlier. Darnold is going to be out there again because they got J.J. McCarthy and they're going to play him. Cousins might be out there again because Atlanta may want to pay Penix. But, Daniel Jones is going to go somewhere and maybe he can rehab himself. He's a good athlete with a good arm. Geno Smith did it in Seattle. Baker did it in Tampa. I think
Alex Smith did it here.
Right. I think more and more teams are going to take option number 3, which is door number 1, Monty, is the quarterback that is absolutely positively you're going to pay all that money. He's elite. Door number 2 is that guy you have to pay because he's good, not great, but what else do you got? And then door number 3 might start being, you know what? We better take a little closer look at the Geno Smiths and the Baker Mayfields and the Sam Darnolds and those kind of guys, because maybe they can be rehabbed. Maybe they're not done. So that means, you pointed this out earlier, that means Mac Jones, that means Zach Wilson, that means Daniel Jones. That they might start looking at these guys going, hell, I don't want to pay a guy $60 million. And I don't want a broken down Aaron Rodgers bitching and moaning at the podium every week. So you know what? I'm going to try to rehab a guy. I'm going to try to find the next Sam Darnold. And I don't love Sam Darnold, but you can't deny the fact that while he may not win a Super Bowl, he's been more than serviceable for a price that most teams would love to be paying their quarterback who's good but not great.
What if Sam Darnold had played, let's say Brock had gotten hurt last year, and Sam Darnold came in and played great, and they decided to go with Sam Darnold and trade Brock Purdy? What would they have been able to get for Brock Purdy? Probably a day 2 pick and maybe a collection of day 2 picks. And they probably would be in a better spot than they're in right now.
What if somebody came to you? What if one of those desperate teams just out of the realm of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, you're looking at, I don't know, 8, 9, because teams are going to come up and get them. I don't care what the draft guys say, because we've heard all these guys say that those guys aren't in the top 10, but they're going to be pushed down to draft that way. So what if somebody did say to you, hey, you know what? We'll give you a top 10 pick for Purdy. We'll give you a top 15 pick for Purdy. We can't get one of these top guys. Because after those 2 guys, Like you said, there's some guys who you'd take in the later rounds, but Carson Beck has been horrid at times this year. There's been a number of quarterbacks who just haven't stepped up.
If you're the Jets, you sit at 6 right now.
Yeah.
You're not going to get Shador.
You're not going to get one of those guys.
You're not getting Cam.
The Raiders and Giants take those guys in some order.
Yeah, so those guys are all gone. So if you say who's outside the top 3 or 4 that's going to need a quarterback, well, the Jets for sure, maybe Cleveland, possibly New Orleans.
Yeah, they need.
I don't know. After that, actually, it's now you got to go further down the board. But there's going to be some teams, and the teams that there'll also be teams that would be willing to look at Brock and say, hey, you know what? These quarterbacks in the draft are a crapshoot. Look at the last couple of drafts. Let's take something more of a sure thing. Couple last thoughts before we get out of here, and I really appreciate you stopping by, but a couple quick hitters. Look at this scene. This was Buffalo. Look at this.
That ain't for me, dude.
Look at that.
That is not for me.
That was unbelievable. That's Buffalo. That looks like a different planet. Now, I'm born and raised in Northern California. I went to Sac State for college. I scouted a little bit, so I've been through Canada, been through the country. I've seen a lot of the U.S., but I've never lived in cold places. But, Johnny, you have lived all over the place. You've lived in Utah. You've lived in Detroit. You've lived in Dallas. You've lived in San Francisco. You've lived
born in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, you. So, what is your philosophy on these godforsaken places with snow everywhere? Do people have to live there? I mean, is there somehow a gate around Buffalo you can't leave? I mean, otherwise, why?
I'll give you a quick story because I'm from Southern California. My first wife was from Portland, Oregon, and it rains there a lot, but it never snows. So we're living in Detroit. We had just had a brand new house built, and we're leaving. We've been there probably 2 months, and it is freezing. It's like 20 degrees. We go to the airport. George is a baby. We fly off to the West Coast for 10 days. It's, I don't know, godforsaken. Back in Detroit, it's freezing. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I open up the door to our brand new house out of the garage. It's completely frozen. I look at the toilet, the first toilet I see, the water is frozen in the toilet. I turn to my wife at the time and I say, this house is new. How could our heat be broken? How could, what the hell's going on? And she goes, oh, I shut off the heat. We were gone for 2 weeks in January. I go, honey, you can't turn off the heat. I go downstairs. The pipes had burst.
Oh, no.
The toilets had cracked. It's, the whole, the place, it would take a day for it to warm up. So I keep my calm. She goes to a hotel with the crying baby. I turn on the heat. I call a plumber. They come down. If you've never lived in it, you just wouldn't know. Like, I guess, you can't turn. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. You can't turn off the heat, but she didn't know. I mean, right. There were times where we were trick-or-treating with kids and it would be Halloween and it's snowing like you can't even believe. And that's just the start of it. And it's gray every day. You wonder why people are so angry. You wonder why Lions fans are so into their team, because after the season's over, there's nothing. It's snowy, icy, gray, ugly, nasty. The reason I left Detroit was it was May 9th. I'm not kidding you. It was May 9th. I'm going to the morning show. It's a blizzard like it was in Buffalo. And I roll down the window. And I guess I can say this on your show because I've always not. I go, it's fucking May 9th. What is going on? There was 1 year in Detroit where I had just done the draft coverage at Allen Park at their headquarters when Matt Millen took one of his famous 3 receivers in a row. I can't remember if it was Roy Williams, Mike Williams, or Charles Rogers, but it's snowing in late April. Like it's a blizzard. People are sliding all over. It's almost May. It starts as early as October. It doesn't end until around, April or May. It's just miserable.
That's awful.
You have to stay inside for 8 or 9 months of the year. It's a miserable existence.
Best city and worst city. Best and worst city you've ever lived in.
Not Detroit. Pittsburgh was the weirdest. I mean, it's not East Coast. It's not West Coast. They have their own language. It's just a weird, weird place. And I was doing sports radio there, and it was the middle of summer, and I was trying to talk Pirates. How stupid of me. and people were a guy called in, and there was a quarterback. You would know him because you're a junkie. His name was it Brian St. Pierre? He was a quarterback at like
Boston College.
Oh my
there
God!
You go.
And a guy calls up in that Pittsburgh accent that I can't do, and he screams at me, "We don't give a damn about the Pirates. Talk about Brian St. Pierre. What are they going to do at third string quarterback?" And this is in like June. It's all they want to do is talk about the Steelers. In Detroit, at least you could talk about Michigan football and Michigan State basketball and the Tigers and the Pistons were winning championships. And you could talk other things. In Pittsburgh, if you're not talking Steelers, if you're not talking Steelers football, then they're going to scream and yell at you. And there's just a passion because, again, it's miserable and snowy, and all they want to do is drink beer, shoot some whiskey, stay inside. It's a gray, miserable existence. And I would ask, and you know what? You go back there, though, the people there, they're gritty, they're strong. Dan Campbell has built what Detroit is.
Sure.
These people, me and you, our blood is too thin. We go back there for like a minute. Oh my God, man. My blood is thinned out. I could never go back to Detroit or Pittsburgh and live there. No way could I do that.
That is so awesome. All right, 2 last questions. Who's going now? In the preseason, I had Niners Texans right now for the Super Bowl in New Orleans, 59 in the New Orleans, the Big Easy. I'm going to go right now with the 10-2 Eagles against the 10-2 Bills. I'm going Bills Eagles right now. Who did you have at the beginning of the year, if you remember, and who would you go with right now?
I know I had the Niners like a dumbass. I had the Niners in there.
Part of the flagship station is you almost feel like you're obligated to pick the Niners, right? Because you don't believe?
Yeah, you don't believe?
It's like that kind of thing.
I'm with you on the Eagles. I think the Lions are really good, but I still can't get over the fact that, again, I used to do pre and post for the Lions and the Millen Man March and Rod Marinelli winning no games and Steve Mariucci getting fired in the middle of the year and Joey Harrington. And I mean, that was when I was back there. So the Lions are going to lion. I don't know how they're going to do it, but the Lions are going to lion. Losing Aiden Hutchinson's big, and the Eagles are playing really good football. I think the Eagles are going to make it. And can Buffalo beat Kansas City? That's the only thing. They have the same weird thing that the Niners do.
They already beat them. They just beat them 2 weeks ago. So maybe they.
You know what I mean?
Maybe
like,
that's proof.
Time, is that going to be something? Because I don't believe in the Steelers. I know they have a bit of a gaudy record. I think it comes down to Buffalo again with Kansas City, and this time maybe Kansas City has to go to Buffalo and deal with that weather. And Kansas City's winning all these one-score games. And I remember a couple of years ago we were saying the same thing about Minnesota, and we thought, this luck's not going to last, and it didn't for them. But it seems like Mahomes just pulls everything out. They've got a good defense. Offensively, they're not great. I don't want to say the same thing as you. So I'll say Philly and Kansas City in a rematch in New Orleans.
Wow.
Damn, we were going back there.
Let's hit the star chats, and then I got one question for you, and we'll leave. Nicholas Federico, did a tornado hit your house, John? Why is every single picture in the background completely crooked?
I got some nails up here too. I got to add some new ones because I had some old ones, and then they let me go, and I pulled all that down. But I got to get some new ones. And you're right; these are, I don't know if like that one right there. Boy,
you need a straight edge. You need a straight edge.
Crooked. So
we got this one from Claude Daddy Arcade. Stoked to see and hear John Lund with Larry tonight. As am I. Matthew Vader, Larry, do you think the 49ers would have won the Super Bowl in 2021 against the Bengals if they beat the Rams in the NFC Championship game? My wife is a Bengals fan, so I wish we got to see that matchup. Hey, the one thing I do know is that the Niners beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So there you go. That would have been 3. So, yeah, I'd have to say yes.
Yeah,
Mufasa says
Mahomes they can beat.
Oh, I know. Well, that's what makes me think Mahomes is going to go down this year because now the Niners aren't going to be there. Somebody else will knock off Mahomes. And then we'll watch the Super Bowl going, man, the Niners probably could have won.
I would love to see the Bills in there. That would be cool.
It's time. I mean, Josh Allen's getting one, and he's probably going to be the MVP this year. So to me, it seems almost appropriate.
Sunday night when they kept showing him when he was a kid in 49ers gear and Fireball.
Yeah, I'm sitting there going,
that guy somehow.
Thinking to myself, how many guys who grew up in Northern California can we not draft? Tom Brady, nah. Aaron Rodgers, no. This guy, no. My goodness.
Listen, if you grew up in Northern California, we will not pick you, no matter how good. That's Great point.
It might resonate with our fans. We don't want that. Mufasa says, sign Mac Jones ASAP. We put this one up there before. Mufasa says, bring Aaron Rodgers to the Bay. MF says, the Giants might get Corbin Burns. And that was the last topic of the night. I'm going to ask you about that. But first, let's go through the rest of these. Why does Chris Lincecum have beef with John Lund? I heard you talking about this actually a couple weeks ago.
Studio, and he smelled deeply of scotch and cigarettes, and it was like 9 a.m. And this had
never a good sign.
I mean, he was hammered, and he didn't like me anyway, and he didn't like anybody because he would listen in Seattle at all of us talking about. And I don't know how he couldn't, because we were always speaking glowingly of Timmy, but Timmy had been pitching horribly, and I might be a little bit off on the numbers. Remember Krug? He never got that big contract, but the Giants gave him a thank you contract at the end.
They gave him a $35 million going away contract.
They did. And so all I said to Chris, who was in studio, is I used the term thank you contract. That's what I said. I said, Chris, look, they gave him a thank you contract. I just kind of said in passing, and you would have thought that, I lit a fire like directly under him. I mean, he lost his mind. His eyes got red. And
Tim Lincecum murdered innocent children and babies. Suddenly he took it that way.
He deserved it. Making excuses, this, that, the other. The thing that started to be funny, and I think he got really mad, was he goes, this was before all the analytics came out. It was years ago. And he said, do you know Jimmy's spin rate? Do you know the difference between his he starts throwing this crap at me. And I stopped him kind of in the middle of it, because you know how it is. It's like, it's your show, right?
Right.
You're not getting away with this. I said, Chris, I don't care about spin rate. I don't care. I said, it's a bottom line business. And at the time, I think Timmy had like a 5.50 ERA or something. I said, he's got a 5.50 ERA and a $35 million contract. That's a thank you contract, Chris. And he lost his mind. I mean, it was just screaming, yelling, spit flying, whiskey breath. I mean, it was just.
You should have leaned in and be like, he's a freaking glorified mascot at this point. He's a freaking mascot. That would have just been awesome.
But you know this about him. I mean, he didn't like Krug and Kipe for a time. He thought that Krug was critical of Timmy. It's like,
oh my God.
And I mean, it's,
those guys are wearing stirrups.
Yeah, I think we made up at a later point. But yeah, he came in. Greg invited him in studio. He was liquored up, and he had heard some of the things I was saying. And again, I'm not saying negative stuff about Timmy Lincecum. Everybody loves him. I just simply said, and the Giants concur.
It was true.
Here's $35 million, man. I know you're not the guy you were, but we owe you. So
that was his parting gift right there. And don't talk about disrespect when you get parting gifts. Lots of guys don't get them.
MF is a longtime listener, because that happened in
MF's a big time Giants fan. Andre Garibay says Kyle will panic and bring in Kirk Cousins. Oh no. J-Jop drops says Larry would win a locker room fight because the Niners don't have a fight. LOL. Oh, wow. That's harsh. James Foster. Lund, you the man, bro. James Foster in the house.
$2 for that.
Brian B says Tanner Mordecai should start every game the remainder of the season.
I'll defer to you on Tanner Mordecai. You've been talking about him since camp. You love
I love Tanner Mordecai. No, it's the 4.46 speed, and he's a winner. I like Tanner Mordecai. I think Tanner Mordecai definitely is better than Dobbs, definitely better than Allen. And I'd like to see him. If they're going to end Purdy's year, give me some Tanner Mordecai. Just even one start, because guess what? This guy's going to play well, and then everybody's going to join the Krug show because they're going to be like, Krug said he was good.
You were.
So I need Kyle, if you're out there watching, and I know you are, give me 1 or 2 games of Tanner Mordecai just so I can, bask in the glory of being right.
Hey, somebody brought up Corbin Burns. Just 60 seconds on that. They were never going to sign Blake Snell under Buster. They want guys who are going to pitch every 5th day and take the ball and go over 200 innings. And Blake Snell threw 104 last year, so that's not going to happen. And look, I'm not saying the Dodgers aren't going to win the World Series, but their 5-man rotation is Ohtani, who pitched no innings, and they got 2 guys at the top pitching no innings. Gonsolin is the other one.
They got the guy from Tampa, right, who got hurt, right?
Yamamoto pitched 90 innings last year. You got Glasnow that pitched 134.
Glasnow, there you go.
And you have Snell that pitched 104. I'm not saying they're not great, but they all 5 combined for over 300 innings last year. Hell, Webb almost did that himself. So I heard John Morosi say this today, and there's 2 sides of it. One side of it is he's a horse. He's going to go 200 innings.
Burns?
Burns.
Yeah, Corbin Burns is a right-handed hitter, right-handed pitcher, and he pitched at St. Mary's, so he's from the Bay Area. He's from
He's
from
the
Moraga.
area, and he had something like a 2.47 ERA. Pitched great for the Orioles, who want him back as well. The Giants needed number 2 behind Webb, or he's the one. Webb's the 2, whatever. They need to trade excess pitching for hitting, and that could be Harrison, that could be Birdsong. I don't care. But the thing that scared me about what Morosi said today is that because Burns is a little bit younger than Snell, that he thinks he'll command over $200 million. And even though the Giants have that kind of capital, they don't often act like it. And you know this better than anybody. I think Burns would be a perfect fit. He's going to take the ball. He's going to be a warrior out there. But $200 million in 5 years. Now, maybe Buster's completely different, but the front office, the people who hold the purse strings, have been very resistant to going to 5 years on a contract, especially even though he's younger than Blake Snell, for a guy who's 30+ years old. The Giants just generally don't do it.
The one thing that I like about Burns is I think he's durable. I think he's going to maintain durability going forward. But yeah, I mean, I'd much rather go kill, go find some hitters and spend their money there. I'd rather spend the money on the hitters. Ron Douglas says, Larry, if the 49ers get the number 18th pick in the first round, which position would you draft? It really kind of depends on who's there. I mean, at 18, I mean, there's a lot of speculation, but I mean, I just named for you a few guys that I really like. Kenneth Grant from Michigan, gigantic defensive tackle. I love him. Luther Burden, the third, the wide receiver from Missouri, tremendous player. Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, is an all-do-everything kind of a tight end.
Even against USC, like 20 passes.
Yeah, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, Trey Harris from Ole Miss, the receiver, Walter Nolan, the D tackle. They're monsters. They're first-round picks. I like all those guys. It's hard to say now. I mean, it's April. I mean, it's December, and we're projecting to April. But give me some time. I'll come up with some names.
The one thing is just because we can never get enough draft talk. At some point, if you're going to be drafting that high up, it's really hard to find tackles anyway. But generally speaking, you got to get the good ones up high.
Yeah.
Start looking at like Dallas right now with Tyler Guyton, who's a nice athlete, but he's going to take a while to develop. That's generally how it is. We've seen Tristan Wirfs and some of these guys come in and really be really, really good. Cross in Seattle was a top 10 pick. Yeah. He's starting to come around.
That's where those guys get picked.
Exactly. If they're in a position, we were talking earlier, they're at 14 right now. If they're in that, 10 to 14 range, Colton Miller's been solid for the Raiders. I mean, that's where these guys get taken. I know McGlinchey was not as good, but man, you get a top 10 pick and there's a left tackle sitting there with the way that, Trent is. And I love Trent, man, but he can't go forever. And you put him on the right side, which McKivitz stinks anyway. And then you bring him over to the left side when he's ready. I know they need defensive line help, but man, if there's a left tackle that you think you can stick there for 10 years and you have to start him on the right side or whatever till Trent goes, Trent's got 1-2 years maybe left. I know they just redid his deal before the season, but if you have a chance to get a top 10 offensive tackle, you got to take him.
Yeah, no question. And if you're a college football fan who's a big Niner fan and you're sitting there going, well, tell me who I should watch in the final month of the college football season, go watch LSU. LSU has Will Campbell at one tackle, and they have Emory Jones at the other tackle, and they're both going in the first round, and they're both tremendous players. So I would say if the Niners are going tackle in the first round, it's probably one of those two guys. MF says, Larry, ask John Lund why John Heyman has beef with John Lund.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have beef. But when the whole arson judge thing went down,
you went off on Heyman?
Yeah, so no, I didn't go off. He said something like this guy might go here. It was, I don't know, it was something like that. And I just it was an innocent joke. I just tweeted at him and said something about arson judge, like arson judge again, or how's arson doing with the Giants, or I don't know, something smart assy like that. And the next thing I knew, he blocked me. So
oh my God.
He can block me for an arson judge joke. I mean, come on.
I mean, if
bro.
you get blocked by Kawakami, that's one thing. But if John Heyman is blocking you, that's really something.
Well, I mean, come on. Man. If you make a mistake like that, honestly, Krug, don't you have to own it? Like, you made a mistake. Own it.
You made a mistake and you toyed with our emotions. Come on. Man. He knows exactly what he did.
Webb was pissed off at you, man. He tweeted. Did he block Logan Webb? I know Logan Webb tweeted him like Logan Webb tweeted at him, "Not cool." Remember that? He
Yeah,
tweeted
well, I
him,
would love to see him
cool.
do that when the Yankees lose a player to the Giants, and then tweet to the New York fans, you know
Right.
what? Said player
Oh,
is coming
thanks,
back to the Yankees. Oh, actually, we fucked that up. He's actually going to the Giants. It's like, dude, you'll never eat in Manhattan again.
Oh, if he like this is not going to happen, but a hypothetical. If he said, "Oh, the Yankees are getting Soto, it's not even a thing," and then he goes off to the Giants, Yankees fans,
he'd have to quit his job.
Yeah, he'd have to block everybody.
Exactly.
One
Johnny.
simple innocent arson joke, Judge, and Mr. Sensitive over here blocks me. Come on,
Seriously,
man.
come on, John. At least buy yourself an H for that first name.
Yeah.
Calba Kamiga says Pittsburgh's starting O-line includes Zach Frazier, 2nd round, Mason McCormick, 4th round, both guys I loved in last year's draft. Their 1st-round pick, Troy Fatani, played in week 1, missed the rest of the year. The Niners need a similar draft in 2025. Calba, I agree wholeheartedly.
Oh, yeah. Come on, go off a little bit more because I got to be
love
honest,
those guys.
because you're not going to give yourself enough credit. You wanted Frazier, you wanted McCormick, you wanted him before last year's draft, but he brings up a hell of a point because Fatanu was at Washington. He played left tackle at Washington, but he can play all along the line. He's probably a better guard than tackle.
Yeah.
But he's going to get healthy next year. To get those 3 guys, Fatanu in the 1st round, Frazier in the 2nd round, McCormick I think was 4th round. To get those guys, I mean, they just redid their line for 10 years.
I mean, imagine if the Niners did not take Ricky Pearsall and instead took Zach Frazier. And had Zach Frazier, who, by the way, it doesn't say here in this super chat, but it's a fact. Zach Frazier has the best numbers of any interior rookie offensive lineman in the league this year for the Steelers. He's played a lot. He's a badass. He was a badass at West Virginia. Could you imagine if instead of adding Dom Pooney, the Niners added Zach Frazier and Dom Pooney and had 2 dominant foundation pillar points of their offensive line instead of just 1? I mean, when you improve one guy in an offensive line, it's like in the NBA when you add somebody to your starting 5. It makes a big difference. There's only 5 guys. If you change out 1, it's a big difference. Well, if you change out 2/5 of your offensive line for really good young players, your offensive line would have been quite a bit better. They should have gone with Frazier at center and plugged him in. He's a brawler. He's a tough guy. He's a wrestler. And he was a lock to be great, and the Steelers know what the hell they're doing, and they picked him.
Called off the field last year at West Virginia. It was like he didn't want anybody coming out. He busted his leg and crawled off the field.
He busted his leg and refused to be carted off, so he crawled off.
He's a madman.
Yeah, I mean, come on, that's your guy right there.
Didn't Pittsburgh take like Broderick Jones, the kid out of Georgia, at tackle? I mean, over 2 years they took 4 offensive linemen. They're going to be there, free agency. You used to say 10 years, maybe 5 now, but I mean, they took 4 young players who are going to be pillars on their offensive line for a number of years. And look at that. What are they? 8-3.
Yeah. They're bouncing back, and then suddenly they look good. That's what you do it. That's how you do it.
There, and they stick to their philosophy, and they go in the trenches, and they draft great line. They just do it year in and year out, and year in and year out. They don't fire their coach. They have continuity and consistency, and that's what the Steelers do. And
when was the last time the Niners, really put resources into their O-line? I mean, they drafted Joe Staley in the 1st round. They drafted Anthony Davis and Mike Iupati in the 1st round, and then surprisingly, they signed Alex Boone, who was a great signing, and Jonathan Goodwin, and suddenly they had a dominating offensive line and almost got it done under Jim Harbaugh. So build up the offensive line. It's overdue. Keyshawn McMillan says, genuine question, who is the guy worth $50 million? Every one of these guys continue to lose to Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar Allen, Dak, Hurts, even Burrow has lost since being paid. Just say no one is worth 50 to 60 million. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, that's kind of the going rate, and it seems like these guys get overpaid, and then
unfortunately, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Is Purdy's next up? Remember, Jimmy Garoppolo for 3 seconds was the highest paid quarterback at $25 million, and then Derek Carr was, and the number keeps going up. It wasn't that Jimmy was great; it was just his contract was up, and the 49ers had a decision to make. You either lose Jimmy after you just had Blaine Gabbert and Brian Hoyer and all this crap under center. And so you're so desperate, you have to pay these guys. You don't have to be great in the NFL at quarterback. You just have to be good, better than most. And a team is going to keep you. The system. I mean, look, I like Brock. It's nothing against Brock. It's just, he's going to get the money. I don't, he is right. Who's worth $50 to $60 million? Nobody is, but they're going to pay at the position because it's supply and demand. That's why if we go back to Ayuk, there's plenty of supply. He didn't have the demand shouldn't have been there, except for teams who were desperate, like the Steelers and the Patriots. They were showing you that they were the only teams that were going to pay market value. I think that in the future, they're going to be disappointed with the decision to give him all that money because they're going to lose other players. You can get receivers. Don't fall in love with them. Quarterbacks are a totally different story.
Yeah. No, they should have traded Ayuk. Mufasa says, what's going on with Tariq Owens anyway? Nothing. He's not very good, and he's super raw, and he's never going to be any good. Ty the K's Cage says Frazier and JPJ from Oregon both fell to the Niners, and they passed on both of them. The JPJ, I think, went to the Raiders.
He's playing center Raiders.
Yeah, seriously. That's it. That's it for us. That's going to do it. Johnny, tell people if you've got a big announcement coming up. And Dusty Gold says Larry's spoken like a real scout. I'm not going to pull any punches because I don't pull punches. And then B Surf says, Johnny, miss you on the radio. I know lots and lots of people do, John. So why don't you tell people, I know you got things cooking. I don't know how much you can divulge tonight or if you want to kind of direct the audience. We got 2,600 plus people watching this stream, and many of them are your big fans, and they would love to be there to support your next step.
Well, when you're done watching Krug and I, just hop on over to Twitter/X, and you can see it right there at John Lund Radio. I've got some posts up right now. I'm going to start in the morning. My hero is Krug. I'm going to start in the morning. Every morning I'll be on for an hour. I'm going to do lives at night, kind of like what you do as well. And you and I are going to collaborate a ton. And I hope to collaborate with some of the other guys. There's a ton of talent out there that hasn't been heard from that we've all spoken to lately. And we're going to get some bigger things going. But we're going to, I'm going to kick something off tomorrow and do all sorts of things. And you're everybody's hero because you've made this thing work and you've done such a great job with it, busting your ass the way that you do. And your son, Kevin, deserves a ton of credit as well, because you guys have shown the way that you don't need a big radio signal. You don't need the big stick. You don't need all that stuff. And it was great while it lasted. And I just want to thank everybody because I had 15 years at KNBR, which in this 15 years in this market and 8 years at KNBR, when you're walking the high wire, like we've done our whole life, Krug, I've been doing this 28 years. It's the first time that it happened to me. I'm not pissed at anybody. I'm thankful for a great run. This is an amazing sports city. And I just want to keep talking sports with you and with fans and everything else. So follow me at John Lund Radio. I got some stuff posted right there. I'm going to start the podcast tomorrow morning at 8. It's called John Lund Unleashed, another fucking sports podcast. So John Lund Unleashed at John Lund Radio on Twitter. Sign up and do all that kind of stuff. And there's enough food out here for everybody. So I always appreciate you, man. Like I said, you're my hero. I'm not kidding. We've been friends for all the 15 years that I've lived here. We've worked together on opposite stations, same stations. We've lived across the street from each other. You coached my kid. It's been a great experience. And I love that, the thing people don't realize about you, man. You're in a business full of egos. And I'm not saying this because you're sitting here. You called me the minute I left that building. You were the first call. You called me on my way home. Most people, when you get let go of a job, they act like you're a pariah. They don't want to talk to you, don't want to touch you. You have a disease. They're all nervous around you.
I may catch it. I may call him, and then I'll be fired.
I don't want to be next. And you called me on my way home. You called me this morning. What can I do? Come on, talk about what you're going to be doing. You're just one of the good guys, man. And good things come to you because of that. But you bust your ass. You showed how it's done. You're not going to just sit around, do an hour a day, hang out a little bit, throw out a couple of tweets and be successful like you've been. You, your son, everybody around you, your sponsors. You've just done a tremendous job in showing how it's done, because we can all do this. There's a bunch of guys in this market that are super talented that are going to come together, and we're all going to put, put a hurting on some people that don't get it because we got a lot of talent out here, but you've led the way. So congratulations to you.
Thanks, bro. Really. And everybody, if you're in this, if you're, one of the 2,600 people hanging out, we're almost an hour and 44 minutes into this stream. Go over to at John Lund Radio and sign up. Let's get John to 10,000. Only like 2% or 3% of all YouTube people ever make it to 10,000. John, you're going to be one of those one of those people. And, hey, when you're a friend of mine, you're a friend for life. And I support my friends. I back my friends. And, like I said to you on the phone, John Lund will prevail. And it's not because you're going to do anybody wrong to prevail. It's because you're a good guy and you produce great content. And the audience throughout this, and I kept aggressively showing you a lot of those comments up on the screen because I want you to see how many people out here are huge fans. They were fans of KMBR. They were fans of you and Pop. They were fans of you and me, maybe on the pre and post, and you and other people and different, but they're fans of you, dude. They're fans of you, and they want to know where you're going next and what you're producing next, and they want to support you. So I'm glad that I can have a hand in it. I'm here to support you as well. Everybody sign up over there at John Lund Radio. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks to Better. Thanks to Pig in a Pickle. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to Johnny. Have a great night. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon'